So what I want to present to you today is my experience, my hands-on experience, something that is the most important for me, that I collected over the last few years. So today's topic, as Claudia mentioned, is pragmatic approach. So why pragmatic? I will come back to it in a moment, but maybe let's start with some basic stuff. So who am I? So my name is Adrian. I work at SoftServe for 3 months right now, so it's quite a new adventure. And I work at AWS cluster, so I'm AWS DevOps technical leader at my current position. And truth to be told, I am mad about constructing, about woodworking, about all the stuff that brings some kind of effect at the end of the day. So whatever I'm doing, I'm trying to achieve a goal. And this goal should be pragmatic, should represent some deliverables. So in my career, I was mainly leading quite a broad range of industries, mainly around FinOps, energy, biotech, and financial per se. And let's say my choice of preference is always to choose more complex projects, because only thanks to that, I can achieve given, let's say, knowledge that is required for me on a daily manner. So together with my customers, I'm mostly taking care of migrations or digital inclusions. Of course, from time to time, also some actions around troubleshooting or simply modernization. So I believe one of my strongest advantages is the life pragmatism. So whatever I do, I try to make it to the end, and I'm trying to make additional value where I can. And last thing that I want to say basically is it's important for all IT guys not to forget about business. We tend to forget about where the money comes from, and that leads to the situation where on one hand we want to do something interesting, and on the other hand we do not have opportunities that we create on our own. So you might wonder, why am I here and what is the connection between the girl and my position? So truth to be told, life creates best stories on its own. So I joined SoftServe 3 months ago, and my project started exactly 3 months minus 1 day ago. So I jumped straight to one of more complex projects that is based also on partner opportunity programs that I will speak about later on. However, my current project assignment was not without some issues from the beginning. So the moment I jumped in, I realized that this partnership program already started. It was already rolling in, and I was in the middle of the road of this snowfall that was coming after me. So what was missing? Basically, it is startup. So hellfire from day one. No documentation, no data flows, no diagrams, no preparations for PCI, whereas they operate at FinOps on quite a broad scale. So I've walked in and see burning house, and I was tasked, hey, what can you do in 3 months? So basically that opened quite a nice discussion, what is achievable in 3 months. And basically that leads me to the topic of this presentation. So how important are preparation steps? And in fact, what is more important? Good start, good planning, or execution? So guys, we have Zoom. Zoom allows us to annotate. So can you try to open this menu of annotate and just try to use, I don't know, some kind of stamp and choose one of words, whether for you preparation steps are irrelevant or rather highly important. If you would say from your technical background, what is more important? Maybe I can show something like that. If you can show me your preference. I'm not asking you for that without a reason. At the end of the meeting, I would like to ask you this question once again. So I see you are quite silent, so I will proceed. Okay. So let's try to suggest that for you it's important, but you don't know yet how much it can be important to AWS, for instance. So that leads us to first question, which would be how to prepare both technical and non-technical aspects. As I mentioned, we are operating, basically we are operating within the business, and it means that business wants some achievables, some deliverables. Those are mostly about non-technical aspects because business is driven by money. So the first thing I would like to start with are the steps of early preparations. So how to start with project planning? What is the beginning of the migration procedure initiation? Let's say what are the most important steps, because we don't have time to take over all of them. So yeah, discovery. Discovery is a buzzword. Everyone knows about discovery. Everything is clear in that topic. We need just to identify what is in scope. We need to know what is our infrastructure, what is technology stacks, what apps are we having, how much of them should be migrated. We need to take some dependencies on the list. So this is pretty obvious. All of us do discovery all the time. And this is just like an opening, and the opening for so-called assessment. So this is another buzzword overused by marketing guys from all the cloud vendors. So assessment, what is about? Once again, we all done that. So we know it's the evaluation of feasibility, whether we may include something in scope or it's impossible to be done. There's also a tool set to be touched. We need to know what kind of experts we need to bring to the table. So we need to know exactly what are the technologies and where are we going with this migration. And of course, at the end of the day, when we evaluated the infrastructure, we have an assessment. We can do something called planning. And planning is just like a simple word, because we all know we need to plan something. The main question is how to plan it. And probably you're interested in that due to the meeting agenda. So planning is all about frameworks and methodologies. And I know it's easy to say that we need to choose the right framework, but actually there is so many frameworks right now that we are not limited. The same with migration plan. There are ready-to-go templates that we can utilize and based on. The same as budgeting. There are more and more and more tools from cloud vendors, let it be GCP or Azure platform or Amazon or even OVH. All of them create some tools used for budgeting. But all of that is just like a beginning of the journey. So I was also facing all those three topics at the beginning of my migration. And when I come to is an idea that I should treat it more like a journey and treat it more like an adventure rather than hard technical task, because nothing was clear from day one. And usually for migrations, you can expect that not all inputs will be covered. You will not be able to get entire scope. Why? We'll come back to it in a moment during discussion about frameworks. But what I want to start with are technical aspects. So probably something that we are most interested at. So those are key elements. Of course, we can move to some more detailed, narrowed one, but basically we need to know what will be the toolset, as I mentioned previously. And by toolset, it's not only to know that we will use Puppet plus Packer plus Jenkins. This is interesting for us as technical person, but based on that, we cannot narrow down business case. Business case, which drives the business towards migration planning. Key element is automation. There will be a difference when we want to do something in an automated way, or rather we want to stick to manual tasks, for instance, during legacy migrations. And of course, this magic word, legacy. We all been there, meeting the servers that are older than us, seeing some mainframes that still require some cables that requires 5 adapters to stick in our keyboard in. So, of course, all of them are quite important, but let's say for time being that technologies set is crucial if we want to go with so-called cloud native model. So cloud native model, or rather the cloud itself, requires the application to be cloud native. And I know it's a loop. What does it mean? Cloud native means a good development templates, good development procedures. When developers does not take into consideration cloud native concept, this application might not be microserviced. might not be supported by cloud vendors. If we stick lowly to low OS system stuff, like, I don't know, OS locking or some low-level optimizations, we cannot expect cloud to solve those things. So tech stack that is the best to move to cloud will be, of course, cloud native. And why am I mentioning that it should be supported? There are workloads that are very dependent on hardware components, not to mention banking systems and all the auditing stuff around physical availability, where we struggled with setting up AWS local and all the stuff around it. And of course, we mostly meet with enterprise-grade solutions. Sorry for that. I'm the worst case of engineer that speaks half of the day. So enterprise-grade, what it means? It doesn't mean something is costly. It means we can expect that it will allow us to do with big scale. And usually when customer think about cloud, he thinks immediately about scalability. So what's important for us is to maintain those three on tech stack we use or we want to move towards. Because sometimes some legacy stuff is so old, we cannot stick to them. But yeah, those are all buzzwords. What about automation? This is like another thing. So automation is all about what we have and what we are planning to have in the future, in the nearest future. In my practice, I often meet situations when someone is telling me, hey, this is semi-automated. And I'm always stopping at this time and asking, what does it mean semi-automated? So is it automated or it's human automated? Or rather you have a developers team that can develop a solution in place over tickets. And yeah, it's all about primarily approach. So what kind of infra as code we want to have, what kind of pipelines we want to have in terms of CI/CD, what structure of our automation we want to maintain. Let it be some given tools or just a principle of development, because sometimes migration is all about developing as well. So what about repository then? So we can automate something, we can have good approach, but we need to have some kind of repository structure. Maybe our clients would like to keep repository in as structured way as possible to maintain environments parity. Maybe they are planning to use tags and development freeze. All of that is as important as the approach itself. And probably you've seen that approach was good, repository was existing and configured, yet somehow something didn't work. Let it be even some processes. You can just try your best, but processes are so frozen, are so old and unusable that you are blocked with automation by processes. Best example, old-fashioned change management, which does not take into consideration agile development and rather allows only solely waterfall. This is like just one of examples. Yeah, so we spoke about how to do that, what kind of tools we can use, what kind of automation we can use. Of course, till now, there are no technologies given. We focus mainly on this journey of setting everything up so that we can start actually doing something. So last thing, of course, legacy. And legacy is no longer a buzzword. Legacy is actually what makes us burdened with some old stuff. And when it comes to migrations, usually on the table, we have two topics. What can we do with obsolete infrastructure and what we can do not to get in the same spot anytime soon? Because obsolete infrastructure is having bigger cost of maintenance, of ownership, and all the stuff around it. Yeah, so what about the obsolete stuff? So we often see partially hard-coded things in our infrastructure. What do we have here? Hard IPs, hard-coded IPs, or no possibility to use DNS zones because someone already created some kind of subnets in the backend. So this is just like one example. Another one is so-called almost microservice. I've heard that 2 times truth to be told, one was recent, and that is one of my biggest pains right now. We are almost microservice. We are monolithic, but spread over the pods. This doesn't mean you are close to microservice. It only means you want to get there and you need to refactor some things. So the methodology will need to compensate it. And after those all three topics, probably we all have the same things in minds. So what does it mean to us, or rather where it can get us with given approach? So I want to open a discussion and close it at Q&A session. What do you think? There is greenfield and brownfield. Which one is better for customers and for business? Most of us immediately thinks, let it be greenfield because we can start everything from the scratch in a good way. But some of businesses, like Europeans or APAC based in general, they tend to go brownfield because they cannot digitally include from day zero. What it means for us, we need to carefully discuss with customer what we can do, for instance, with obsolete infrastructure containing appliances, some storage, SAN, things like that. I know it sounds obvious, it sounds tedious, but we often met that situation and we don't know what to do. And good framework for migration can at least raise a flag, raise an amber light. Hey guys, something is stinky here. Let's focus on that. Of course, I promise you we'll come back to it in a moment. But last thing I wanted to discuss here is we spoke about automation and the technologies, but what with the approach to maintain this automation and this legacy part? When we hear legacy, we think about pets versus cattle approach. Guys, if you can raise your hand if you've heard about pets versus cattle approach, you can use this raise hand option. Okay, I see no options, so let me quickly dive into it. Yeah, thanks, Jacek. So pets versus cattle approach is how do we want to treat the infrastructure? Do we want to groom it? Do we want to treat it as our animals, you know, to take care of it? Know each our server by name, know each SSH rebound host by all the stuff that is needed to configure jump servers and tunnels and all the stuff around it. Or we want to treat it as cattle. It needs to serve its purpose. So generally, business right now is going towards cattle approach. They do not care about host names, about the beautiful fish names that we give to our farm of servers. They just want the effect. And the effect is auto-scaling group allowing SSHing to our instances, or application that is able to restore after failure. So that is so-called cattle approach. We do not take care of individuals. We do not try to debug too much. We do not try to take care too much of some stuff that we shouldn't be even bothered with. So when customers want to migrate to cloud, they usually want to move from this petal to cattle approach. You can usually see it when you speak about legacy stuff that should be decommissioned. If you're someone who is already all the nervous because he thought that we can take this one as it is and do not touch it. Often I see it in a business, and once again, I've met it recently. So it's not something that was only happening 20 years ago. Customers are still get used to their own old hosts that they were updating for last 15 years. So yeah, till now, I was speaking about general stuff, and we wasted like 15 minutes on some basics, on some foundations. But what it brings to the topic is we already have systematic overview of what we want to achieve. And now the question is, how do we want to achieve that? So let me open another slide. Right, 7 R's. So this is not unique to AWS, just to be on the same page. 7 R's is an approach, how to migrate. So basically 7R is about 7 buzzwords that help us classify the workloads for migration. Now, what it means, what kind of impact it has on our adventure with migration. So this allows us to, first of all, get the scope in place. Second of all, straightforward propose customer and approach. And pragmatically said, it's like a hack for us. We don't need to spend too much time on thinking what to do with a given part of application. We can just allow it to go. And what those 7 R's stands for. So first one is so-called rehosting. Rehosting means we lift something and shift. Easy case, we take our Windows machine with AD and we just shift it to the cloud. The outcome is that we have still operable machine that can be further maintained in the cloud. And the only gain here, because we cannot expect cost saving, the only thing we can get out of it is have everything in one central place. There's nothing more than that. Second approach, second R that we have for us is to relocate. And this is something more unique to Amazon, because usually we met 5R or 6R, and relocate is a bit distinguished. So this is rehosting, but only of containers and VMC. What does it stand for? It's a marketing partnership strategical initiative of Amazon and VMware. It's nothing than that. It's marketing stuff, but it's also placed in this because basically if you need to move a huge amount of VMs, you want to use some automation tools. I will show it on one of the next slides, how this relocate is distinguished from rehosting. Then we have replatforming, which stands for lift, tinker, so upgrade, improve in place, and shift. The gain over rehosting is that usually if we have limited time, if we cannot proceed with full refactoring, we just might want to fix some biggest issues, the most painful topics, like if customer till now was hard coding some IPs, we can try to make it viable with DNS names, set up some Amazon 53, and just allow it to omit some biggest painful points. And why to do that? Because we can prepare the application for further modernization and optimization phase, which is obviously a case for cloud migration. Moving to the fourth one. So of course there is report chasing. It's like a wet dream of all the cloud vendors to sell us as much as they can and as quickly as they can. So this is an ultimate goal of, let's say, non-managed services or non-operable services. So we buy the products, services, which acts in itself. We do not maintain it, we do not upgrade it, we do not patch it, we do not do anything with it. We just pay as we go. So this is also one of strategies. If customer is struggling with some obsolete stuff, and we can just suggest, hey, instead of taking care of this Palo Alto stuff, you can just use this SaaS. You have it for lower price. It's not as robust, but maybe it will be sufficient. Usually it works. And if there's problems, if we are struggling with convincing customer whether he should retain some old stuff or he should decommission it, sometimes an option is to show the cost, or rather the cost disadvantage, because SaaS is the most costly one. And here we approach the better option, the best for technical guys, the best for us, but also the most time consuming. So the holy grail of migration is to fix everything in place and set up customers' infrastructure in such a way that they have all the cloud native robustness starting at day 0. They get as much value as they can, and they can calculate TCO in a new way. So total cost of ownership will be calculated over what they want to achieve and what they do not have from the past, like some burden over legacy stuff. Of course, this is very time consuming, and in the same time, we need a lot of time for preparation stage. And just out of my experience, the longer the discovery phase, the harder it is to convince our customers that we need to proceed with migration. So we need to be careful with proposing re-architecting the stuff, because it is possible that customer will simply be overwhelmed by how much he needs to do within this migration plan. Looking back to what I've said at the beginning, during discovery and assessment, we need to gather as much of information as we can, but in the same time, usually this is partial pre-sales stuff. So we are trying to propose something more. And if we spend too much time on technicals during that time, and we do not present business value, we can lose this opportunity. Customer, in the same time, can be asking 2 or 3 companies for the counter offers. So it's never good to overcommit with stuff, and at the same time, it's never good to spend too much time on pre-sales and not enough time on preparations. We come back here to this preparation step. And of course, we have 2 last things which are obvious, but sometimes I'm wondering how it is possible that customer didn't even consider this option. One is retire. Often when we do the migration, I'm hearing that why we had right now 500 machines and we are going to have 400. So it's important to show that the gain of this migration is also that we can get rid of obsolete stuff. In cloud architecture, we might not need 100 rebound hosts because we will use just the rebound service. For instance, SSM, Simple Systems Manager. And it can just run the same thing without all this net of rebound hosts. Or another example of retiring machines will be AD if we want to go to Active Directory over managed services. So we leverage some kind of managed services. And by that, it means that customer may have lower total amount of VMs. It doesn't mean we are optimizing. It just means we are utilizing cloud native capabilities we have. And finally, the last one is retain. We all know that there are some dinosaurs that we can get rid of. We are having no capability to remove from the infrastructure. And I mostly meet that with so-called monolithic migrations. So if customer is having monolith, he is not able to strangle this monolith into multiple microservices, and he is unable to get rid of some components. And just to give you an example, domain name servers or sometimes that kind of stuff. And basically, yeah, these 7 R's is just like a recipe for us. If we are going with migration and we don't want to think about it too much, too extensively, let's just focus on those 7 possible ways and present it for each of items of business case to the customer. So this one is pretty much wall of text. It doesn't mean anything. So maybe I can present you that same thing in different way. So 1 second. Right. So this time we are looking at value gain, or rather how we are going to proceed with this migration. Basing on our previous examples, it's just the way how we want to present it to customer. There is no like strict manner we need to stick to it, but if we want to use some frameworks, then it can have some bigger impact. Because for instance, Amazon will require you to fulfill some papers. And these papers are important due to multiple reasons, but for time being, just try to look at it like that. We always need to assess and determine migration path first. So we just start application by application, machine by machine, just each of elements of our migration that's within the scope. We need to think what to do with that. And as I mentioned, we can either retain it, so we can either, okay, draw, okay, maybe like that. We can either retain, so decide not to move. By the way, can you see my notice or it's invisible?
I can.
Okay, thanks. So we can either retain, so not to move, or we can decide to retire some and retain remainings. And these 2 options usually are used only for obsolete stuff that will not be needed. If something was having business function until now, it's very rarely that we can use those 2. And what with the rest? So what about remaining options? Relocate and rehost, it's exactly the same. It's just that VMware and Amazon has this partnership. So for them, if you need to migrate such type of workload, you can just use vMotion or Docker movement on their behalf, and they will do that for you. Of course, you will pay an extra sum of money for that. However, it is usually a good option if we are time restricted. We all know cases when at Q3 we get some pre-sales option opened, and we know that by Q4 customer is creating some kind of joint venture or merge the business with someone else, and they want to spend some budget until end of the year. That case is usually like a book example of relocate and rehost, because they have the budget that they need to spend on something as quickly as possible. And even on enterprise level, I've met situations where they wanted to burn the budget because they had it. They had no other options how to spend that. So relocate and rehost are the quick options. Just also, as you may see, you can see how much of automation you can use in that way. Pretty much everything with rehosting and relocating can be automated. And this is just like a matter of tools of your choice. And basically in the middle, you see the interesting one, so replatforming. So basically replatforming in terms of amount of work is in the middle. That is why in the middle of the graph as well. Last two is repurchasing, which is also pretty obvious, like I mentioned a moment ago. Here it's important step because all the rest of stuff is mainly around technical approach and what we are going to do with this given piece of scope. And in repurchasing, we are usually focusing mainly on licensing and the costing. So here, please pay attention that if you're going to calculate TCO, repurchasing can be like a huge pain because you spend a lot of time on technical stuff. It's never enough of time for repurchasing part because we treat it as the easiest way, right? So we forget that this cost can be overwhelming. Just to give you a previous example of Palo Alto appliances. Basically, Palo Alto itself can cost 1,000 times more than the infrastructure on which it runs. So if you decide at some given point of time that, for instance, you want to have some exotic solution with stateful DNS-aware firewall that will be able to inspect and mirror the traffic, Palo Alto is a natural choice. And in the same time, you can expect expenditures of hundreds of $1,000s per year only for instances of Palo Alto. That is something that we cannot predict at the beginning, but the more we discover, the more we realize that repurchasing can really drastically change the total cost of ownership. And as I mentioned, just to repeat it one more time, refactoring is the best option when we have time and we have a budget for it. So if customer is willing to open a discussion about budgeting, we can stick to it. Basically, refactoring is a good way to go if we can have some additional value that we can sell to customer. Sometimes we have some use cases where we prepared some kind of solutions, so we can make a, let's say, upsell on top of this migration. It's also some kind of pragmatic thing that occurs from time to time. Even though we had a scope, customer in one good meeting, one good use case, one good storytelling, and we can just sell something more. I'm not telling it to make like all the efforts towards that, but trust me, from time to time, it's good to save some stories from your previous projects and just to try to tailor it up for this customer. And sometimes you can open a new discussion, at least open this discussion for further meetings. It's just something you know from experience. So that is about migration strategy and how does it, let's say, cooperate with our migration project planning. Migration strategy is usually the first thing that customer is asking about at the beginning. So they are not interested in technologies, they are not interested yet in the cost factor, they are interested in the fact whether it's feasible or not. If from the very beginning we are seeing some struggles, we are seeing that we might not be able to finish the migration in accordance to in-scope items, usually the discussions around migration strategies. And if you stick to best practices, if you stick to this 6 or 7 R methodology, it usually can bring some additional points. Why? For instance, there are migrations which are done according to APN programs. So amazing partnership network programs. Basically, if you stick to these strategies, you can get help out of amazing architects that can support you during some business case building phases. Or if you run into troubles, you can just show, hey guys, we followed the best practices. We just tried to follow this framework. Can you lend your hand here? Can you help us a bit? So that is why I mentioned that it's good at least to be aware of those facts that there are such strategies. Even if we cannot use them because our customer is unique, try always to think about it. So guys, this is like half of truth that I've told you, because application migration strategies is just like an opening. It's just a standard, but it isn't framework itself. So about framework, we will have like few additional slides later on. And I think this will be the most interesting for you because we are all lazy by our nature and framework solve a lot of issues for us. So I promise to come back to it in a moment. However, right now I have one more shady and boring slide. It's about migration bubble. Please raise your hand if you ever heard about so-called migration cost bubble, or maybe migration double runtime. Have you heard about it? So probably that is this thin line that let's say separate us from the business itself. So for us, the migration is about technology, it's about the value gain, it's about what we will be doing within next months. For us, migration means that. For C-level management, migration is only about KPIs and only about capabilities. They can have their own KPIs and capabilities for everything. And there is one special group of people that deserves a special place in the hell. Those are chief financial officers and the PMO itself. So everything that they are carrying off is migration cost. And unfortunately, so migration cost bubble, that is a time when customer can, and probably he will, face so-called double run. It means that he will have some kind of old infrastructure that is still on place, and he will also have new infrastructure, pilot or POC. Or eventually, fallback plan for cloud migration sometimes consists of having old infrastructure for 2-3 weeks more in place, just in case like something unexceptional would happen to our new cloud platform, new landing zone. We can have fallback plan to old platform for the time being. To give you an example of such approach, customers that are quitting solutions like Heroku or Engineered, they always tend to have some backup plan because they know that things can go wrong. And resolution is, of course, to keep old infrastructure for a few weeks more, but that creates a cost. And this is so-called double run cost. It means, in fact, that if we wouldn't migrate, we would be on this blue line. We would be somewhere below the migration cost, because migration costs add this additional stuff. Customer needs to pay for this migration. He needs to invest his time as well, because shadowing phases, all the stuff around it, it will require time from them. So basically, we need to convince him to bear this additional cost. And probably that is one of the toughest things when we speak about the migrations. So for us, it's natural. They will get cloud native functionalities. They will be scalable. They will get rid of single point of failures. They will have better documentation in place. They will have everything which is robust, yet still somehow they are inconvenient. They are not convinced by us. And this is this migration cost that is on top of our proposal. Customers do take care of that and do worry about it. So I don't want to spend too much time on this particular slide. I just want you to think about how much those additional factors that we discussed can impact speeches of migrations. We are doing pre-sales, everything looks fine, but all of a sudden, when we come to the cost, things get grumsy, get slowed down. Just keep in mind this migration strategies and this migration cost bubble. Just take it in mind, because soon you will realize, within the next few minutes, I believe, you will realize that it can impose a quite significant impact on our proposals. So now, not to bore you too much about all this stuff, is it everything technical that I had for you? So for time being, yes. So I will not speak too much further about technical stuff because, truth to be told, whoever of us wants, he can just go and Google what is replatforming strategy for application or how to automate things using CI/CD deployment stuff. There is a ton of documentation, and usually the problems with migration are conceptual one. It's not a problem whether we will propose Ansible, Chef, or Puppet. For customer, it doesn't matter. For customer, what matters is deliverable and gain of this technology that he will see. An example, if he can automate patching process, and this will save him 500 man-hours per quarter, it is countable. He can count the cost, and he can just calculate it in total cost of ownership. That is what is important in these topics that I mentioned. So for now, for a time being, I would like to switch to non-technical aspects. And non-technical aspects for us, it will be like a bit, you know, when we are preparing dinner, we need to have some kind of recipe, but we still need to execute it. And usually execution means that we need to get our hands dirty. And by this dirtiness, I'm thinking about some of the stuff that is really boring, but really helpful. What am I speaking about? I'm speaking about all the matrix of responsibilities, all the plans, all the charts that high-level managers are using to discuss our business case. And try to imagine a situation when you're doing your best with customer technicians, you convinced everyone to the migration, but C-level management simply don't get it. They don't see the dependencies, they don't see the values, just because we are technical men, we are focusing on stuff that we are doing on a daily basis. We do not think too much of it. So I want to ask you a question. So guys, if you can annotate, once again, if I can ask you to annotate, what do you think? Do we really need at least Rosy, Write, and MigrationLock? What is your opinion on that? Most of us work without it, and our project finished successfully. So if you can just annotate, what do you think? Is it needed or rather not? I'm a bit worried why there is so less of yes options, or rather there are no options, but okay. So let me proceed and try to explain what those items are, because maybe that's why there is no mutual understanding why it might be important for us to save our back. So Rosy Matrix, we all know that. Rosy Matrix is nothing else than responsibility, accountability, consultancy, information matrix. What it means? We create some kind of table, and name by name, we enumerate team members and customer parties and teams, probably, who are responsible for each item which is in the scope of migration. If we are going to move database, we don't want simply to put it, we will migrate your DB. It won't gonna work. Our customer will most probably don't understand what is the responsibility of that action. He might ask, what exactly do you mean by migrate the database? Will you move the data? Will you sanitize it? Will you improve indexing of the tables? Single entrance is not enough. We need to have responsibility and the action item, and as well, we need to have accountability, because usually we do not work on best effort manner. We have some deliverables and we are having targets to achieve. So Rosy Matrix, just remember, it's a table with names and with one of 4 letters. Responsible stands for who is responsible for the given action, so who will do that, in fact. Accountable means who made the decision and who is at the end of the day, accountable for the effect of this decision and this action. If technical person is responsible, usually his manager is accountable. It's like quite strict solution. The thing is that accountable, you can never have more than one accountable person per row, and this is good rule of thumb. You should not cross it, because if you have multiple accountable and multiple responsible parties, you have blurred responsibility. And probably you all were in the situation where there were escalations and nobody knows what happened, nobody knows why you are escalated. That is because there was blurred responsibility. So just try to remember that it's way better to have two less responsible and accountable rather than give just one name too much. Two more are just for additional information. So consulted entities, those are guys that needs to be consulted prior to making the decision. For instance, if we want to perform DNS migration, or we want to move data set from old storage to S3, and someone is to be consulted, we just need to drop him an email asking, hey guy, are you okay? I proceed with this change right now. If you perform this action without consultancy, you risk that accountable person will chase you after. And outcome, probably you will get escalated. This is like a real life example that unfortunately I know, but we need to keep it in mind that if someone is consulted, he needs to be consulted in real life. He should not be only informed. That is the role of I on Rosy Matrix, which is informed. Informed person is just when you drop an email, hey buddy, I just started, just to let you know, the colleagues favor. And that is the Rosy itself. So probably all of you seen a Rosy matrix, but just to remind you, Rosy is a table, and this table has just line items. So for instance, one of actions is onboarding, second is maintenance of Kanban, third might be the Rosy upkeep, fourth might be to address the blockers, fifth might be for deep discovery, and of course, ideally, you should have the names. You can use colors, it doesn't matter. Rosy doesn't have structured, let's say, one good version. You can operate as much as you want. You can put team names, you can put people names, whatever fits the migration. It needs to be readable by customer, because based on that, usually the Rosy matrix is an opening for assumptions and for identifying the responsible parties. It's also useful in some additional cases. I will speak about it a bit more later on. But as you may see, in all lines, only one person is accountable. Like in that case, one person is accountable. Second will be responsible. So in fact, this person will perform the activity, and this one will make sure it's in place. And of course, we may have some consulted and some informed person. So I hope it's a bit more clear, because Rosy is just like division of the tasks, division of the actions. It's nothing more. We often forget that such thing even exists because we get used to teams. But Rosy is not, it's not about the teams itself. Rosy is more about understanding the responsibilities. It's a very good tool when it comes to the escalations. So good way of project management stuff is to maintain Rosy as actual as possible. So that was first boring stuff. Another one, unfortunately, will be write. Nobody likes write locks. And usually people ask why we don't like write locks. Question and answer is rather easy, because on write locks we have names. And those names that are assigned to the risks means that we are accountable for something, and probably if we get into issues, we will get escalation on ourselves. So RightLock, by its names, it's also acronym for 4 letters: risks, assumptions, issues, and dependencies. Those are big words, self-explanatory, but let's give it a try to guess how to connect them with potential blockers, because that is also why RightLock can be in use during migration. So first, letter R is for risks. Risks are only potential problems. They can occur, not necessarily, but might, and we need to take them into consideration. You probably guess why. Because if we get them into consideration, we can judge how much of contingency, how much of time, additional time we need to secure for the migration. So in case of any of those problems and issues occurring, we have some time to accommodate to it. Basically, business doesn't want us to make some soft statements in the offerings like, we will do our best to resolve it within reasonable time. Such thing never goes in contract. In contract, there is party A and party B will have 2 business days to resolve issue of, let's say, priority 4 to 2, and half of that time for priority 1. So we need to be aware of risks to create such statements. And those statements are rather bold. Assumptions in contrary, they are easier. So assumptions are only potential blockers. So we assume that we will fit into given size of machine. Let's say for database, we assume that. What happens if we prepared all the migration steps, we have empty databases in place, we started migrating the data, and all of a sudden we realize that data set is 10 times bigger than we do the discovery, and data set requiring full data set scans, full database scans, right now doesn't fit into RAM memory. All of a sudden we broke assumption, which means we have potential blocker. For database, it's pretty easy. We will just scale up. But what happens if actually our assumption was that application is cloud ready, it's microservice based, and we discovered in the middle of migration that this assumption was wrong. This migration cannot be moved because it's so tightly bound to the hardware itself. This is something that we need to capture, and the place to store it is a RightLock. Additional place, those 2 are my favorites. So issues and dependencies. They can be used as shields. So if we create enough of issues and dependencies, we can prove business that it's not our fault that something did occur. Or eventually we can address problems faster, because some dependencies can raise awareness of business, of high-level business stuff, that those are potential blockers. There are risks assigned to given names, so they will start to be more careful about those names. And the play with Right is ultimately the same. No technician guy wants to be this person that is assigned to the risk. It's like old game that everyone are trying desperately not to be on this list, and all the time it makes the same amount of let's say, fun at the calls, because when actually people start to be responsible for something, they can get to quite radical statements why they should not be. Just to give you an example from my past, one of database administrators were no longer responsible for the data set itself, just because after movement to the cloud, he cannot no longer see the zeros and one on the hard disk. So that means that someone else is responsible for the data. And this is like a true statement from the call itself, that because he doesn't see these blocks, because he doesn't see the storage, he cannot have it in hand, it means he cannot be responsible actually for this database any longer. So it was told by quite high person in terms of technical advancement. So it's worth to know that some dependencies are even more funny. RightLock, how does it look like? Once again, it's our choice how we want it to look. For instance, here, you see that I chosen for my project a table form where I have number of ID. It's easy for calls when you can just say, can you take a look at element number 4, which is assumption? It's helpful. Then I have some kind of descriptions, and usually RightLock has more than one description field. Why? Because we want to have also comments, or we want description also to point out to proper team to address the stuff. So do not treat it like some ready-to-go template, maybe just something that you can start with. However, some things are typical for RightLock and they need to be there, like impact and possibility to change, to vary. With that, you need to be careful. Red colors and high words are usually catching the eye of customer. So if customers think that there is assumption or risk with high impact and high likelihood to vary, they start to ask questions, and we need to be ready to answer them. One of those things to address this issue will be remarked within the framework, because we will slowly sail towards the most important part. So how to identify those things. I promise to come back in a moment to that. But one last thing that I wanted to mention about RightLock, why it's so important. In RightLock, you have names, no longer teams, no longer emails of the teams, of the aliases of some DevOps teams. Here you have a name. If there is a risk, there is a person. If there is a person, he is the owner of the risk. If risk occurs, he is responsible to address that. So ultimately, before we start the migration, we need to focus on finding the correct owners. Never allow RightLock to have empty fields, because empty fields are usually the most problematic to fill in. So in the moment when we will get into the trouble, we will have this risk in place. If we didn't spend enough time earlier, then we will need to struggle even more right now. So good rule of thumb, guys, always have a name. Never a team, always a person. So that was after Rosy. RightLock is second out of 3 items that is needed by all major cloud vendors to prepare some kind of partnership migration programs. So I promise right now I will speak about the last boring one, which is MigrationLock. And this is the easiest one. So I left the easier for the end. So MigrationLock. Here, but what I mean is MigrationLock is whatever we want it to be. It has completely no structured form. It needs to be built, tailored for given migration. And important fact is that it needs to be based on experience, on our experience. Nobody is able to tell us how MigrationLock should look like. And basically no one will ever share this knowledge just like that, because, you know, guys are keeping this hands-on experience for years, and that is what makes them good at the market. So with MigrationLock, we need to figure out a few things, and then creation of this document is way easier. So it depends on our case. Some MigrationLocks needs to be iterative, some consequential. What it means is some needs to be adopted to agile migration plans, and some will be on waterfall manner. Waterfall means that we will just proceed action by action, and we will not iteratively come back to previous steps. Agile means that if we see that some things are not working okay, we can always come back to them. So this is like a biggest difference, but it also impacts how this MigrationLock can look like. So probably until now, you have some vision how that MigrationLock might look like. So I want to share my MigrationLock with you. Probably your smiles are because you've seen that enough time and you hate it as much as everyone else. Yeah, it's Kanban board, so it's Jira. Jira is a powerful tool. It can be used for everything, for tracking the backlog, for maintenance of active tasks, for rapid management, for agile sprint-based development, for putting the proper items into proper order. So we can create like a list of breached items or blocked items. Kanban is just an example of MigrationLock. And if by any time you will do a cloud migration, you might be tasked or rather asked by both customer and cloud vendor, hey guys, can you provide us with MigrationLock or migration project plan? We'll come back to it. But if they ask about it, it means that they want to make dependency list, not without the reason. Everyone, all the senior level management guys are always tracking the dependencies. All the businesses, in fact, about risks and management of dependencies. So those 2 aspects are pretty much important. So this is just my example. I do not force anyone to use Jira products at all, because I know how limited they are. But this is something to keep in mind, that we need some kind of MigrationLock to prove that our methodology is in the plan. We are back on the rails. And by that, I wanted to proceed to migration frameworks, but the question is, are we there yet? So I told you about Rosy, about Right, about MigrationLock. I told you about the frameworks like 5, 6, 7 hours, whatever the cloud vendor says. So are we there? Are we capable to start with the migration itself? Unfortunately, no, there is one more dependency. And this dependency is about migration plan. So deliverables in scope, out of scope, and so-called detailed migration project plan lines. This is probably the hardest part to do. So the question is, whether a migration project plan is really a key here, whether it will help us, whether it will resolve all the issues. Well, at the beginning, you said that preparation steps is important. So we all agree that we need to prepare in a good manner. But even if we have Kanban board, if RossyLock is as detailed as possible, even if we really fulfilled all the possible steps, is there something more to be done? And the question is, unfortunately, yes. This is the document that is crucial for partnership programs. And what is partnership program? It's a program that allows us to use deliverables for migration, or rather to use some kind of structured plans, structured frameworks that we can use to validate our migration procedure, to validate our assessment, validate our discoveries, validate our migration plan. And of course, migration plan consists of something more. But what is important here is that migration project plan is different from all other documents in the one of most important aspects. Migration project plan, sometimes so-called SOW, statement of work, or migration definition, because we are sometimes telling that this is definition. So all of them are structured, and all of them are based off some kind of templates. Amazon provides us with some of those templates, and customer needs to sign them before migration can occur. So as you may expect, after all the preparations we've done, is it really the end? We get the signed document, we get all the steps in place, we have really everything we could. The question is whether something else is to be done if we have really the signed migration project plan. And I promise this is the absolutely last boring stuff for today. Yes, there is one more document, and this document is like a passport. This is like a passport, not to the success, but to the pockets of our customer. So before such document is getting approved, he will go all over around C-level management. And C-level management guys, you can imagine those shiny, brilliant faces in black suits that does all the decision making. So they are like a bread for us. Without the decision-making process, we cannot proceed with migration. And trust me, even right now, even though my project is already back on rails, it's on good shape, I still am struggling with one more thing that I want to tell you about. This thing is Gantt chart. Did you heard about Gantt chart at all? Or rather, did you have a need to revise it with someone? Okay, I see no raised hands. So maybe I will show you what is Gantt chart, and you will tell me you will tell me whether it's evil or help. This is a Gantt chart. What does it state? This Gantt chart represents one of very simple migrations, which consists only of 2 applications, very standard landing zone, and this consists of 155 items in total. So looking here, you see that I stated only 17 of them. You can imagine how this Gantt chart will look like if you include 155 items for simple migration. This is a list of dependencies of actions. And to give you an example, before we can install Linux, we need to have image of this Linux machine. We need to have networking. We need to have configured some security standard. We need to have configured some automation to deploy users, or some standard to deploy service accounts and necessary services, like Puppet service to further deploy some automated stuff application components, libraries, things like that. And if you are seeing that, please just take a careful look at this part here and try to see which items relies on which. And right now, probably you may ask yourself, what kind of process is that? This is just a simple landing zone extension on living brownfield example. A lot of dependencies. And why am I mentioning it? I was asked about Gantt chart and dependencies by C-level manager that has low to nothing technology knowledge, and he was afraid, or rather he was very careful with decision-making process because he didn't understand what will happen if one of those items will not finish in good time, whether there will be dependencies on timeline. So I tried to explain it to him using those entries, using those lines, and explaining step by step what happens if we don't have proper machine template for Terraform, and this Terraform should rely on some additional dependencies of automation, of CI/CD, etc., etc. And well, his decision, his face was far from my expectations. So this is just like a representation. Unfortunately, I cannot show his face, but basically, yeah, he looked at me like an alien, and he asked me whether I'm serious with what I've just told. Even after dozens of migration, I still didn't realize that some C-level technical officers might not, in fact, get the technologies. So at that stage, I somehow revised my knowledge, and at this point of time, I also decided that I want to share this knowledge with you. I know till now it was very, I don't want to use word boring, but it's nothing interesting for us, right? Because we want to proceed with technical stuff. But without all those steps, you will just meet such a reaction. And trust me, this C-level manager was not the worst case that I've met. So basically at this stage, we can sum up a bit of this journey. So even though we prepare the best we can, even though we capture all the inputs, we have assessment done in the best way, we know everything what we want to do, but still I was missing something. And this something was at the last, let's say, 100 meters of my marathon. It was just lack of experience how to treat some higher level, let's say, managers when it comes to dependencies on money, because that was purely dependency on money. So that brings me to an idea. Hey, if there are some ready to go migration frameworks, would it sort out some of stuff for me? And answer is effectively yes. So now I want to proceed with this a bit more interesting part, which is about what we can do to omit all these issues that I mentioned. So till now, I was mostly speaking about stuff that needs to be done, and we didn't start our work yet. So let's come back for a moment to more day-to-day useful stuff. So question is how to start migration planning based on AWS toolset. As I mentioned, AWS because I know it the best, but I know that for Azure and GCP, there are migration frameworks as well. So as we spoke previously, we have discovery phase, we have assessment phase, and we have planning phase. But all of that is just like a preparation. We didn't start anything yet. So in amazing wording, assessment is just evaluating what we have. And assessment has its own framework. I will come back to it in a second. Mobilize stands for preparation of everything that we assessed so that we can start with actual migration. And migrate and modernize, those are phases that are utilized in the framework to actually go step by step with migration with help of amazing solution architects with some additional stuff. And basically, one of the programs that is used for that is so-called map program. Map program, you can Google it without any issues. It's open to the audience. Map program is nothing else than a program to help accelerate the decision to make customer aware of some options for faster migration. So treat map like some kind of lockpick. If you need to migrate, customer is not willing to do so because of some obstacles, because he's afraid of, just try to imagine a situation where you can propose him, hey, buddy, you know, I have something for you. If you are undecided, we can do such thing like some workshops. Amazon will pay for that. And then we can use some ready-to-go framework to evaluate what we need to do and how. And all of that is written by the best experts in the cloud market. So you can trust them if you do not trust us yet, because on pre-sales, we are just building the relationship. There is no this mutual understanding yet. And on top of that, like a cherry on the top, you can just mention, hey, you know, map program is also about one more thing. If you migrate using this framework and you commit to Amazon here and now, you will get some credits. And this credits is nothing small to be talked about. For assessment itself, if this is mainframe, you can get like $100,000 for your customer. Simply Amazon will transfer 100 grants to your customer just to somehow emphasize him to migrate. It sounds ridiculously, but it works like that. Simply Amazon want to push a leverage, try to convince him a little bit to start this migration. Then mobilize phase, so preparation. If customer is willing to go that, then there is a moment that gentlemen don't speak about money, they just use them. So customer is getting up to $400,000 in cash for his infrastructure, for his migration purpose. It's not everything. They can get also some support and partnership offers from Amazon itself. So by going with framework, you do not only get some helpful, let's say, questionnaires or helpful stuff. You also get the real money, and real money is nothing else than decrease to total cost of ownership for the migration. There is nothing more important to C-level managers than the vision of reduced TCO. And finally, when you decide to migrate and modernize, there is one thing that you get as a company as well. So in this trio, we have customer, which is undecided to migrate or is not sure that we can migrate everything in a good shape. You have Amazon, that is official partner for this migration, and he's also a sponsor in the same time. And you get yourself as partnership company. For instance, SoftServe company acts as this kind of partner. And what it means is that if we successfully migrate our customers to cloud and we achieve all the deliverables according to this stuff that I described to you, so everything is according to the best practices, Rosy, RightLock, MigrationLock, migration project plan, everything is really according to the needs of Amazon. Amazon is not afraid to invest in us as well, not only in customer. So all of a sudden, we are in the situation that customer receive money because they are willing to migrate. We are getting money because we are guiding this migration. Of course, we are not doing that for free as a business. And Amazon itself, Amazon gets client, customer, which is on his cloud. And truth to be told, chances that customer will fly off the cloud after 4 or 5 months are relatively low. Usually customers, when they go into cloud, they partially locked in, vendor lock-in, and they stay there for months, if not years. So definitely Amazon will make something on that for them as well. But yeah, map program is about money, is about framework, but probably you are interested how does that framework looks like and whether other cloud vendors propose something like that. Answer is yeah, they do. First thing is so-called MRA. This is just a marketing name. It's Migration Readiness Assessment. And this framework is nothing different than just interactive GUI with some special activities, observation and actions that produce scoring as a result of this framework. I want to operate an example here. So one of examples of outcomes of the scorings, I see it doesn't look very nice, but trust me, if you prepare such data, such low-level data for business, they start to see colors. They no longer see some wall of text on the left side. They see colors, a lot of colors and a lot of numbers. And they start asking questions like how our business case looks like. So on one side, you have customer that is getting some observation and actions in those terms. He's seeing scoring, so he might immediately ask, why do you think we are so low in detailed business case? Should we work on that? In the same time, Amazon gets an insight to this deal. Amazon knows whether we are ready for this migration or not. Once again, if we are trying to convince customer, as a company, we take some risk. As individual, we take some risk. If we work with some company on migration as B2B contractors, take a close attention that you might be responsible up to some amount of money. Usually it can be a significant sum of money if you fail that migration, deliverables at least. So you get migration readiness assessment with some scoring. There is more scoring. It's really very, very, very thorough questionnaire. But what it produces is just green, red, yellow tables. Per se, it doesn't mean anything important for us. It's just a case. We just have some numbers. What is really, really important is what happens next. So we issue such MRA analysis to Amazon Cloud and to our customer. Amazon revise it for us, looks whether they see some problematic spots or where from their experience they can make our awareness. Hey guys, you know, we had a lot of customers that were not having CI/CD pipelines and they were going with full automated deployment. We see it, of course, as well, but sometimes Amazon, you know, there are like 5,000 architects there. If you hit the proper one, he can get you with valuable insights. But definitely, the thing that I want to raise your awareness is MRA is an input. Those are raw values used for something. This something is named CAF. And CAF, once again, marketing name, sorry for that, is standing for Cloud Adoption Framework, so-called CAF perspectives. So what is CAF, you may ask? You see some words: scope, business, platform, people, governance, operations, security, yada, 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 nothing interesting. What is interesting, it makes some kind of readiness charts that are way more visible to us right now, and they are visible to customer as well. So if you come back to this high-level C-level manager and told him, hey, you see, this is the CAF perspective chart. You looks like that. This is based on more than 100 questions within MRA questionnaire. We've done 25 hours of deep discovery. So we have deep discovery outcomes, we have MRA outcomes, we have all the insights from cloud vendor. We've done everything we could. We serve our expertise because only accredited partners can use such kind of frameworks officially. Of course, you know, unofficially you can just follow the principles and no one will tell you about word according to that, except for you will not get this opportunity for partner cash. So this is something important, that if you want to use those frameworks and get this money, not only the framework insights, not only these questions, but rather everything behind that, you need to be a partner. But this is something that in the backend. So what happens if you go to customer with such chart? C-level manager will see some lacks, like in operations or governance or people. All of a sudden, they realize that there are some niches where they struggled. For instance, my customer realized that really they had a strong problem with operations. Earlier, when I was trying to discover that and discuss with them, they were like, just give us an evidence, show us proofs. And after MRA and CAF, I have a ton of proofs. There were dozens of questions around operability. And basically at the end of the day, when we started this discussion, I was well prepared. So it was not only that I had my documents for responsibility matrix, for migration plan, I was armed with ready to go recommendations for them. It changed the situation that it was no longer a fight with customer, it was a dialogue. and this dialogue is very extremely patentful. So probably you may ask how those questions looks like. It's really that easy. And of course, first questions are not interesting one, but unfortunately, I cannot show the more specific ones. So as you may see, first, Amazon start asking some general questions. What kind of workloads we have? According to that, they can evaluate the architect to take over this CAF perspective chart and make a session with you to discuss this migration plan. The more descriptive we are, the better. Then there are some questions about technologies. So as soon as you choose given technologies names, you will get more and more questions about those technologies and what to take care within migration project plan. And that makes a lot of sense. So all of a sudden, except for money, except for framework, let's say guidelines, except for help from cloud vendor, we get the most important thing. We get question by question plan how to prepare migration, how to prepare this assessment and mobilize phases. There are templates for that. I am just showing you a small subset of it. So probably you are mostly interested in what is in these CAF recommendations. It's on case. So there is no like general CAF recommendation for customer. You get some epics like business case or skills and correction of errors or operating model. You get business cases and you get some entries. Those entries are defined during CAF perspective fulfilling. So as you progress with MRA and with CAF, you get more and more recommendations. At the end of the day, you just push it, for instance, to Excel, and you can prepare a presentation to start a discussion with customer about actual migration. So you are prepared. You have all the non-technical stuff in place because we've already gone through that. You have all the, let's say, technology stack, all the descriptions of what we want to achieve. And also we have an opening to this discussion. We have consultancy from Amazon. Basically, we have everything. This is how we proceed with migration. This is how we really want to build, let's say, the case for customer. Of course, there is a lot of storytelling, a lot of additional discussions like deep discovery with technical teams, but basically all the migration stuff goes towards these frameworks and how we operate with frameworks, like with this CAF and MRA. And probably one of last questions. So what did we potentially miss? And guys, I will be honest with you, we didn't touch even 10% of the migration frameworks. It wouldn't be enough time for an entire day to go through it. We didn't spoke about things like automation tools, like AWS Application Discovery Service, like server migration service, database migration service, like things like Migration Hub. We didn't spoke about calculations of total cost of ownership and business case. We didn't spoke about CMDB, about the ITIL processes. We didn't spoke about well-architected review, which is a part of good practice for migration. And basically, this brings me to the conclusion. What then? So we have tool set. Let's say our company is a partner to cloud vendor. What we can do? We can, first of all, we need to be aware what kind of partnership programs or frameworks we have from our cloud vendors. So what to do with them? We may just go to the portal, go through the documentation and get some takeaways, like whether there is funding within this program, whether there is support from accredited partners or accredited solution architects. We can get information about whom to this project plans are designated. Just to give you an example, landing zone is suitable for everyone, but vending token machine model, not necessarily. And finally, what we can do with all this knowledge. So we can prepare nothing more, nothing less than migration project plan. This is all about it. Migration project plan, and one of signatures from customer is like a milestone and It's a difference between whether we start with migration or no. And to wrap it up, guys, I want to repeat one question. Can you annotate? Do you think that preparation steps are important? They're relevant to us. They have some place. If I can ask you to annotate. Oh, I was expecting at least 2 more. Come on, guys. Yeah. Thanks for that. So at that stage, I wanted to thank you